Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and it is time for the hero study for the month of June here in 2024. I find it fortuitous, this was not planned, that for those of you watching the YouTube video, the poster over my left shoulder is actually a poster of Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber. And it just happened to be that I had that as next in the rotation for having it behind me for these videos. Today, we're going to talk about my favorite Jedi of all time. I grew up watching Star Wars, the original trilogy, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. And I fell in love with these kind of characters like Luke Skywalker. And when the prequel trilogy came out, it was interesting to see Obi-Wan Kenobi in a much different role than what we saw in the original trilogy. And yet, there was this one character, Obi-Wan Kenobi's master, Qui-Gon Jinn, that I absolutely just fell in love with. He was very different from a lot of the other characters in the Jedi Order that I ever saw or even heard of. He is described as being a Jedi who is very much in the moment. He's not really thinking too much about the future or really the past. And he is one of those who just trusts his instincts. In fact, he is even quoted as telling a young Anakin to feel and not think. Sounds very similar to things that I've talked about in previous episodes, especially the Trust Your Body, where we tend to overthink a lot of things. And here's someone who's saying, hey, don't get stuck in your head. Just trust what your instincts are telling you. Qui-Gon is also one of those heroes who just trusts what he knows. He sticks by his choices regardless of what the consequences are. We're talking about a character who could have had a seat on the Jedi Council, and he chose not to. I was doing a little research online about this, and one of the things that they were saying about him in particular is he chose not to have a seat because he wanted to continue training Obi-Wan Kenobi. And yet, if I think of the Phantom Menace, there also seemed to be some, we'll say, interesting discourse between Qui-Gon and some of the other members of the Jedi Council. I could even go so far as to say that Qui-Gon was obstinate at times. He wasn't afraid to stand up to people in positions of power and authority when he believed that what they were doing or that their beliefs were incorrect. Now, I haven't done much research on Qui-Gon as a character outside of what I've seen in the movies. And I guess movie. He was really only in the one. And I haven't seen much of anything outside of the movies, really. So I don't know where else he's shown up. I don't know what else he said or what else he's done. I haven't read any of the books that have included him. I guess I do have a comic book by those that make the Marvel comics. And he is, to me, just one of the most strong and stand-up Jedis that I have witnessed. He is an individual who's not afraid to rock the boat and speak his mind and use his voice as a way to get people to question what has become the status quo. Sometimes it feels like that's something that we need more and more today, honestly. If there is anything that doesn't seem right about how things have been done in the past, you can guarantee Qui-Gon's going to have something to say about it, and he's not going to be afraid to speak his piece on it. One of the things that I also see with him as a character is he is a very compassionate individual. Seeing him interact with Anakin and with Anakin's mom, Shmi Skywalker, I just see someone who is really down to earth and really cares about people. The more I think about this, the more challenging it is for me to put Qui-Gon into any kind of compartment, we'll say, in what it is to be a hero, because I think of them needing to get to Naboo. I guess they were already at Naboo. They needed to get to the capital, and they were trying to get the Gungans to help them get where they needed to go. And Qui-Gon was not afraid to use the Force in order to get Boss Nass to let them traverse through the core of the planet, which sounds really safe. But to traverse and get where they needed to go. And there were times when, to him, violence was the answer. Taking down battle droids in order to rescue Queen Amidala and her attendants, and having to do battle against Darth Maul. And at the same time, there were times when he's like, nope, we can't use these powers in order to get the outcome that we ultimately want. It's up to others. It's like he knew when to engage and he knew when to let others engage. One of the things that really stands out to me is how much he trusted. He trusted his instincts. He trusted the Force. He trusted his Padawan. He trusted the people that he was with to do what they needed to do in order for him to do what he needed to do. I see someone in Qui-Gon who is compassionate, headstrong, capable, not afraid to stand up to authority, and someone who trusts explicitly the people who have earned that trust with him. That's something that's very special. In fact, when this movie came out in 1999, I remember going with my family to see it in theaters. And I'm one of those rare few that actually enjoy the Phantom Menace. And I think a lot of that comes down to this one character in Qui-Gon Jinn. I was heartbroken. I guess I should say spoiler alert for people who haven't seen a movie that was released in 1999. I was heartbroken when at the end of the movie, Qui-Gon gets separated from Obi-Wan and is facing off against Darth Maul by himself and loses his life. I did not want to see him. I did not want to see his story end. I wanted to see I wanted to see Qui-Gon Jinn train Anakin in becoming the fulfiller of this prophecy that he believed him to be. That's something else that when I think about this character, I see someone who was fearless, not just to people in positions of authority. He was fearless in everything he did. I think a lot of that came down to his trust. He trusted the outcome of whatever the situation was going to be. He believed that this young boy in Anakin was the child who was going to bring balance to the Force. And he was so devoted to this goal, he was so devoted to what he believed the Force was telling him that he was fearless in engaging with dangerous individuals. We're talking gambling. We're talking putting this kid in life-threatening situations. Not just with the pod racing, but he takes him into an active battle zone. When they leave Coruscant and go to Naboo, he is taking this young child with him. If I remember right, by remember right meaning I'm referencing Weird Al's song about the Phantom Menace, is this kid was 9 years old, and he is so sure that he will be the one to bring about the completion of this prophecy of the Force, that he was going to bring this 9-year-old on a dangerous mission back to Naboo, where there is an active war. Well, I guess there was an occupation that was going to turn into a rebellion, and he brings this kid along and puts him in a very dangerous situation. He trusted. On top of that, if I'm remembering this correctly, Qui-Gon is the first Force user to ever manifest as a Force ghost, which is something that is incredibly powerful. And for this, I'm sticking with the canon of what we see in the movies. Because at the end of episode 3, Yoda is telling Obi-Wan that he can commune with his old master, even though Qui-Gon had been dead for years at this point. That's impressive, to say the least. To be able to effectively cheat death to a certain degree and manifest as a sentient ghost through the power of the Force. That's awe-inspiring in my eyes. He is a Jedi who did not fear the influence of the dark side of the Force. In fact, you could even say that he respected it. It makes me think of individuals who collect swords. I remember I had a friend who, he was kind of a small-time collector with swords, ex-military, and one of the things that he had mentioned about me is that I have a respect for the power of these sharp implements. Even if they're dull, they're dangerous. And you can see individuals. I am going to throw one of my favorite YouTube personalities under the bus here when I say this. One of the YouTube channels that Libby and I like to watch is Good Mythical Morning. One of the co-hosts on there, Link Neal. That man, I don't know how he has not hurt himself in a terrible way. Because whenever he gets a sharp knife, he just points with it, he swings it around, he is incredibly irresponsible with this sharp implement that can cause harm not just to himself but to others. And when you see someone like that, you see someone who doesn't have respect for the power of something like a knife or a sword. And I can see the same thing with Qui-Gon. He was not afraid of the influence of the dark side of the Force. In some of the just very surface level research that I was looking at, just trying to prepare for this, he has had encounters with the dark side of the Force. And the Force was telling him that if he chose, we'll just use the example of like wanton violence, and if that remained unchecked, then he and other Jedi like him would become exactly what they said that they were trying to obliterate from the galaxy. They would become influenced by the dark side and effectively become Sith at that point. And knowing that, he kept himself in check. He respected the influence that this opposing force had in his life and in the life of others. He wasn't afraid to fight one-on-one, not once but twice, against a Sith. Again, it was just unfortunate how it ended. But he wasn't afraid. He remained stalwart to the end. He was committed to protecting those that he felt needed to be protected, those that he believed needed protecting. He was adamant in his instruction of Obi-Wan Kenobi and allowing him as a Padawan to learn and grow the way that he needed to. In fact, I'm really thinking right now, and I cannot recall a time when Qui-Gon was ever critical of his Padawan. I can't think of a time when he was ever short with him. Qui-Gon was a very patient individual. And Qui-Gon is one of those individuals that I would just like to be more like. I would like to be someone who's not afraid to stand up for what I believe. There are certain things about me that I'm afraid to be honest with others about. I'm afraid of what the outcomes and ramifications are going to be if I do so. I think one of these days, I will be honest about it. Even on this public platform. But that's not today. I wish I could be. When I think of the character, the hero of Qui-Gon Jinn, I see someone who stands up for what he believes. He is an individual who's not afraid to use his voice and his influence in order to make good, positive change in the world that he lives in. He is patient. He trusts himself and those that have earned his trust. And he's not afraid to let others have the spotlight to do what they need to do. And he's also just absolutely fearless. Man, I just wish more and more that I was like him. And honestly, that's why I do these episodes. So I can remember what it is that I want to strive to be. What it is for me to be a hero by observing these other heroes. I hope you enjoyed my nerding out at one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars franchise. And we're not going to leave it at Qui-Gon. We're going to talk about some others, but we'll sprinkle them in so it's not just so heavy month after month talking about characters from the same franchise. I hope that this relative dive into this character and his hero qualities has inspired you on how you can be more heroic in your own story. And until next time, live strong for today. Thanks so much for watching or listening to this podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future uploads. If you are interested in working with me, then take a look in the description where you can find my website or a link just to schedule a free 50-minute one-on-one call with me. Looking forward to talking with you soon.